Hello and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. I'm Taylor Rockwell. No Daryl Grove today. He is recovering from doing an amazing job hosting soccer trivia last night. Thank you very much to everyone who turned out at Penny Lane Pub here in Richmond. It was definitely a very good time, and audio quality permitting, we'll post some of the highlights here in the near future. For now, I called up Prep4Pro's John Roach. We discussed the inhibiting obstacles for American players seeking to turn pro and what his organization is doing to help make that process easier. We also talked about the role promotion relegation plays in helping players develop and mature and what goes into creating an amateur club. There's more to it than you'd think. As I say in the first minute or so of that interview, I've known John since he was my club coach when I was like 13 or 14. He's always been a good friend to me, and I promise I'm not just saying that because he supports Rangers, though that certainly doesn't hurt. So, with all that said, here's my chat with John. So joining me now, I've got Prep4Pro's John Roach. John, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Thanks, Taylor. I appreciate the call.
Yeah, man. So first of all, just so people know, we've known each other since I was, 14, I think? So going on 18, 19 years now.
Yeah, that's right. I remember you when you were small and spindly. And now you're just big and spindly.
And with less hair, I think. Well, more hair on my face, less hair on my head, I think.
That's right, exactly.
So I wanted to talk to you, John, because I know you're starting the Prep4Pro program. It seems like you guys are getting some good press, some good traction, so I wanted to talk to you a bit about that. So to start off, can you tell listeners just a little bit about the program and what you all are aiming to do?
Yeah, so I've been in the game, both sides of the Atlantic, for a long period of time, mostly on the amateur level. And I was one of those players that came over from Europe on a soccer scholarship. So as the American market begins to get better and better, more European players are not seeing the US market as being secondary, but actually making it their first choice. So a lot of players, when it comes to signing for professional clubs in Europe, if the offer of a soccer scholarship comes along, they're looking at that as maybe being their first option. So, with the college game playing that intermediary role in the United States soccer pyramid, if you will, there's a lot of people that are scratching their head about how that works for the professional game, because you're basically taking players at 17, 18 years old, putting them through college, so they're coming out at 21, 22. So a lot of people are asking the question, is it too late? As the professional game passed me by. So from my perspective, it was basically putting a program together, allowing us to bring the European game over to the American market, some of the development techniques, putting them, the players through a program where they could get fully reviewed and then basically assessed to say, at 21, 22 years old, does it make sense for you to give it a go and try and play in the professional game? Or really, have you missed the boat, so to speak? In essence, use that degree you got and maybe play semi-pro or just concentrate in your career.
And so, is it usually people who are either in college or post-college? Are you also aiming to work with 18, 19-year-olds who are maybe considering whether or not they should go to college or should go pro?
Yeah, so what we're doing, there's actually 3 phases to the program. So the first phase of the program is really dealing with players, as you said, who are between 18 and 25 years old, let's say, right? Guys who are looking to try and make their way in the game, guys who are maybe looking at maybe going to college, and maybe guys who are even in college. And what we do is we put a program together that allows them to get identified, reviewed. We go through basically where they're lacking. What is the bit that they need to fill in, or is it just a bridge too far? And at that point in time, it falls into a couple of buckets. They come back through the program, they get ID'd. If they want to finish their college program, they do so. When they come out, we get them placed. For the guys that are already out of college, it's a fast track to get into the game. One of the things we've found, Taylor, and you know this yourself, is the American market is so huge. There's a lot of players that slip through, right? A lot of guys that never made it because they just didn't know the right people. So we're going to give them that opportunity. But in terms of the 3 phases of the program, the first phase was really the American players in the American market who maybe want to go and play in Europe. There's a lot of guys that have played in college who have a pedigree that played back home. They came over here for 3 years, and now they've been out of the game in Europe. They don't know how to get back in. So if they've got a European work permit, we can get them back over there. Or if they're American players who are playing in the market, we've got the likes of John Kowalski, the former US national head coach. We can get you placed with him and his NPSL team, or even with Dave Casper at DC United, based on the connections we've got. So we're looking at that as phase 1. Phase 2 of the program is bringing European players over for the American market. So European-based players that want to come over and play, who maybe are getting their start in the USL, or even if they're young enough going to college. So it runs the gambit, both sides.
And so what's the process exactly? Say you are an 18-year-old who's kind of trying to figure out if maybe you have what it takes to go pro, or either in the United States or abroad. What would they do? How do they get involved?
Yeah, so we've got the website up and running. Basically, we're not in this to make a lot of money. We want to, we'll be going through the normal, the trial of the draft system. I don't know if you've ever been to the MLS Combine or you've seen some of the professional trials. They have, 100 and something players that show up and they wear numbers. It looks like running the Boston Marathon. And then basically they play games for 2.5, 3 days for like $300 or $400. And then at the end of it, they picked the 2 or 3 players they knew they were going to sign anyway before they started the trial. What we're looking to do is do a little bit more of a filtering process. We're going to take a look at the players through an application process, have them send their CV, their soccer resume, really take a look at them, vet them through the coach, do the references and the background check, and then we're accepting, at this point, 30 players to come up, and they spend 10 days going through ostensibly what it'd be like if they'd signed for a European club. We give them accommodation, we pay for their accommodation, we give them their training kit. They get up in the morning, they go through their training sessions, 2 days, and then they have classroom sessions at night, and that's what really sets us apart, Taylor. We're prepping those players, giving them background on performance, fitness, food, nutrition, help them understand what it's like to navigate the European game in terms of an agent. We give them the background, what it is like signing contracts, really giving them that classroom style background so that they're educated on what the next step would be. And then if they're good enough and they're ready to go, then we give them an agent. We get them sorted out and place them with a club. So that's the kind of stages of the process.
So I want to talk about the classroom in a minute, but first, you said they send in their soccer CV or the resume. What does that look like? Because I imagine it's probably not a standard resume where you're like over-embellishing and using words you would never otherwise use. So I'm curious what you all are looking for in a CV.
Yeah, so it's very simple. A great manager once told me that you could stand at the side of a park within 15 minutes, tell us why a player never made it, right, just by watching them. When you take a look at the CVs that you get through, it's very easy to see the players that have played at a decent level, or the ones that are, we know. So the soccer community is very, very small, Taylor. So, the group that we're working with are all guys that I've played with. Like Jim Leighton is obviously the exception of that, who's the Scotland goalkeeper coach, but he's one stage removed from, I've trained with Jim and I've known him. So it's the same thing when it comes to the resume side. They'll put a CV out there, they'll put teams on there, they'll put names on there, and then we go in and we do the references. The other side of the coin is we look for them to give us video of them actually playing. A CV nowadays isn't really a piece of paper because, we want to be able to see the player play. So we get them to send through video of them playing in games. I've got examples. We've got a U19 Serbian national squad player who's finishing up his contract just now, and he wants to take it to the next level. So he wants to come over and really get to play in mainland Europe. So he's a good example of that. He'll send over his videos of the games that he's played, the reel of the games that he's played in, and also the background and the references that he's connected to in the game.
So, and then going back to the classroom, are there areas that you think like more so than others are like deficient when it comes to U.S. players or American players? Because you mentioned like nutrition and tactics and kind of preparing them for like life abroad. But I'm wondering, like, are there like consistent things you see that are problematic or that American players just kind of don't know or don't possess skill wise?
Well, I don't think it's a skill thing. I really don't. I mean, we've seen Christian Pulisic come through.
Yeah.
I played with Mark indoor with the Harrisburg Heat. And, Mark's background in the game is what led Christian to go where he did. If you take a look at it, Christian never went through the American pyramid. He basically went to Germany and came through there. So I think that's the gap. I don't think it's skill level. I don't think it's fitness. I certainly don't think it's appetite and desire. I think it's just being able to be exposed to a consistent methodology where thinking the game and being a scholar of the game really comes first. When you're completely immersed in it, that's what really helps you develop. It's not really the on the field, it's the tactical. So let me give you an example. I took a couple of players on trial from the Central Virginia Soccer Association, CVSA. They played amateur league with me. We went over to train for a week with Dundee in Scotland in the Scottish Premier League. The boys trained for a week, and on the field, they actually looked okay. They actually, one of the boys, they were looking at signing, right? So you're going from an amateur league in Scotland, in America, to Scottish Premier League, right? And the guy was on the bubble of getting signed. The gap for him was reading the game. right? That was it. So I'm standing on the sideline in training sessions, giving instructions, and when they come off for their breaks, walking them through the next piece of that. And then when I got in the car with the manager, who's a friend of mine, Barry Smith, he's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "These guys are good." And I'm like, "Yeah." He said, "But you're walking them through the game." I said, "Uh-huh." He said, you don't do that at the professional level, John. If the guys don't know what the next steps are and they're not there mentally, then we don't have the time to build them that way. So I think it's more helping the American player navigate what the European professional game looks like, and it's different, right? It's a cultural difference, as well as the whole understanding tactically of how to read the game properly. So the mental part of the game gets filled in. So does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. I'm curious though. So what do you think is holding people back when it comes to reading the game? Why do you think that is an issue?
I think it's just exposure. I mean, the American game now, when I first came to America 20 years ago, football wasn't on television, Taylor. It wasn't. But nowadays we've got 3 soccer channels, right? Everybody's watching the Champions League. We're watching the English game. A lot of the boys, if you talk to them now, think about what it was like when you grew up playing with FC Richmond. The exposure to the game wasn't as it is now, right? So that we have social media, we know the players on and off the field, we watch them, we track them, we try to emulate them, but also we're a little bit more exposed to the tactical nuance. So when you see the guys on the television talking about the game, and even your talk show is a great example, we're talking about tactics. So I think the players are getting exposed to it, but I don't think that it's happening day in, day out. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So within Arsenal Soccer Academy, there's a direct line of sight to whoever it is, Giroud, Sanchez. Those players that are playing in Arsenal Soccer Academy, they have direct line of sight to those players day in, day out, right? Even when it comes to the coaching side of the house, there's a philosophy. You don't see the one-off pay for fee-for-service, skill camps over in Britain. You know what I mean? There's nobody asking for $50 to take you out of the ball. Do you want to go ahead and do that? The American players are willing to pay it, but you get that as part of being part of an individual setup, Taylor, right?
Yeah.
So,
No. That all makes complete sense. It's just like because you hear so many different issues about U.S. soccer and what's holding the development of soccer back in the United States. And there's there's the pay for play aspect of it, where it's a lot of money, and so it ends up being that people just kind of want to make money off of it. So it's interesting to hear that you guys are kind of looking to deal with the actual gaps that prevent people from kind of making that jump.
Yeah, again, I'll tell you this just now. When I first came to the American market was actually more mature when it came to foreign players. I had players from Trinidad, Italy, France. I'd never played with players from all over the world before until I came to college. So I was exposed to it. My coach was Polish, but he was the US national assistant manager. So I got to get the cosmopolitan game. It was a little bit of muddled style, but the American game was more physical, right, as it still is today. Now, what I'm saying to you now is with this programme that we've built, we're wanting to take the philosophy in Europe, which is and has become more cosmopolitan. Look at the English Premier League. Name the team that has 5 Englishmen in it. Probably a team that got promoted last year and is probably first for relegation. So you take a look. So that is the world game, and I think America's stepping there. What it doesn't have is that pyramid, Taylor, right, where you've got promotion and relegation. You've got clear line of sight to your Premier, first, second, and third division. Look at the progression of players, right? Players try for the MLS straight away, right? If they don't make the MLS, what do they do? There is no, I can start off with a team playing in the NPSL that gets promoted to the NASL, which then goes to the MLS. So I'm learning as a player as I go along. That progression doesn't take place. You've got guys coming out of college who, if they don't have a good college coach who never really played the game at that level, they've just basically stopped development for 4 years. They might be fit. They might be able to run all day, right? They might be able to trap a ball, but when it comes to actually being placed in a game with other players from different teams with different philosophies, they're not going to be able to cope. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So
I'm also getting that to the next level.
I'm also curious, though, from your experience. So what was it like? Because as you mentioned, you played college, but then I know you played pro, various levels, various locations. What do you think is the difference in the U.S. game as if you're an up and coming professional now versus back when you were playing?
So I think that soccer's become widespread, right? And I think people are talking about soccer every day, which is good because you've got identifying players becomes easier. From our perspective, and it's still this way today, which is unfortunate, you have to know somebody, Taylor, right? There is no such thing like you get in Europe where you can play with your local team and I know you know this because you've been in England where you have your junior football, right, which is the semi-amateur or the amateur level. We have the CDSA, which is a fantastic league. It's brilliant, right? But in Britain, it's a lot more formalised. So you can have somebody like Jamie Vardy who goes in through an academy system, doesn't make it, drops down the leagues, goes into non-league, right, bounces a couple of years there, finds his feet, and then the next thing you know, he's playing with Leicester. Leicester start to go up the leagues, right? And then the next thing you know, he's getting bought and he's playing in the Premier League. Now, more and more players are coming through that way because people develop at different levels. In America, it's becoming better, but it's still not there yet because the pyramid isn't fully built. You don't have promotion and relegation, right? And there is definite segregation between the likes of the Richmond Kickers and MLS teams. I mean, they're even talking about putting Colt teams, which is your basically reserves, like DC United's reserve team, in the USL. You know what I mean? So that doesn't allow the promotion and relegation thing to happen easily.
Yeah, so I'm curious then. So is that, do you think, a big inhibiting obstacle for overall development? Is that something that you'd like to see changed? Is have promotion and relegation in American soccer?
Yeah, I think it will help the game a lot because what you'll see is a lot more money pumped in at the grassroots level. Because America is that country that's built on I can start small and get bigger, right? And with that comes the whole army of fans. I remember when Fleetwood Town was in the Eastman Premier South. Now they're in the second division. I've followed them all the way, right? I remember when Luton Town was in the Premier League, they made it all the way down to non-league and now they're back up. If America does the same thing, you'll start to see the Gillette money, right, and the Glazier money come back from Britain, right? Because you can invest $1 million, own your own club, put a little stadium together, and then you can progress up the league, and then one day you can get to the MLS. Whereas today you have to buy a franchise, and your franchise is designated in a certain area. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
it's
I
not
hadn't
like
really
you're actually building something.
I hadn't really thought about promotion relegation from a player development standpoint because you usually you hear a lot about how the lack of promotion relegation limits like the growth of individual clubs and it makes soccer harder to kind of like get behind at a grassroots level. But I didn't think about how it does kind of limit your ability as a player because you're right. If you go out of college, for example, if you don't get drafted, then you're going to those combines, you're going to the different like open tryouts, but it seems very disorganized. And you're absolutely right. It does make sense that if you have a club at a low level that you can get with, say, I mean, not even low level, but if you can make the Richmond Kickers and you know that there's a chance that the Kickers move up to MLS, then it kind of exposes you more. I hadn't really thought about it like that. That's really interesting.
Well, the other thing that happens as well, if you take a look at in Europe, you buy the player for the division you're in. Right? So you'll notice this after you see relegation for the Premier League. You'll see players like Pickford, right? The goalkeeper for Sunderland, right? He's a great goalkeeper. He came through this season. He established himself in the first team. His team will get relegated, but he'll stay in the Premier League because he's Premier League class. Somebody will buy him. There's a lot of talk about him replacing De Gea when De Gea goes back to Spain. So that's the sort of thing I'm talking about. The other thing that happens is you get players that get brought in to play for promotion, and then when promotion happens, that guy's kind of tapped out and he's reached his level. So he goes and he plays for somebody else. He signs for another team at that level. So that's where the player piece is also a large component of the development of a club, right? Because you're buying a player to suit the division that you're going to be in. There's a lot of talk about how much money is going to be spent for teams competing in Europe nowadays. Right? Celtic's a good example in Scotland. They've talked about buying 2 marquee players to come in because they're going to want to compete in Europe. They won the league last year, but they know that the team that won the league isn't good enough to play at the next level, so they're trying to get the players in. And that then breeds that standard, that difference, that need for you to not have to buy a $50 million player, but to invest in the academy system and ensure that you're bringing young players through, players that are at right level, that know how to play the game, that can play at the highest level and can assimilate themselves into your reserves and in your first team. So does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. What I don't love, though, is that you said when De Gea goes and not if De Gea goes. And speaking as a Manchester United fan, that just makes me sad.
I'm just telling you, it's going to happen, mate. You have to balance the books somehow, right? So.
No, I think it's good to be like $800 million in debt. I don't see any problem with that. I think they're doing just fine. It's wonderful. So what are the next steps for you all? I think last time I talked to you, you said maybe there was a camp coming up in Maine. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we're going to run a program, the 10-day program that the players will go through. They'll arrive, they'll get their physical, they'll do a full physical. We'll put them through their paces for 10 days. We'll give them constant feedback as if they were training for an actual game. We'll bring in an NPSL team for the guys to play against. And then the scouts and the coaches will sit down and they'll evaluate the players and they'll give them feedback. For the guys that are good enough, we'll end up getting them placed. We already know there's one player that's probably going to make his way over to Wolverhampton Wanderers in the First Division, the Championship, which is the First Division in England. We're going to send him over there, so we're just working out the details when it comes to the work permit side of the house, and we're working with the lawyers for that. So that's the sort of thing that will happen. So it's supposed to go 26th of May through, I think it's the 3rd of June, 2nd or 3rd of June when we release the players. That's what we're looking at.
That's pretty interesting about the that you guys have the lawyers involved as well, because that is a kind of a constant issue, is like trying to find like a grandfather who is Lithuanian so you can get some sort of European passport. So it's nice that you guys are working on finding or helping people find solutions for that issue.
Well, that's the thing, right? So we talked about this program. I've got a player that plays for me just now at Partizan. Mm-hmm. Justin Williams, lovely guy, good player as well, very good player. Justin, when he graduated college at Longwood, he did what a lot of American players wanted to do. They wanted to continue their career and play in Europe. So he spent a lot of money and a lot of time going over and going on trials with teams where he really didn't know anybody. And I think he spent about $3,000 or $4,000 going and spending time over trying to get trials and training with teams here and training with teams there. And it always came back to the same thing. Yeah, you're a good player. We'd love to have you, but we can't sign you. Yeah. So what we're going to try and do is help the American players. Rather than pay all that money to go to Europe to be told you can't play, we'll do some of the background work for you first. We'll get the lawyers to take a look at your situation. We'll take a look at your pedigree when we look at your soccer resume. We'll see you train for 10 days. And then, as you'll find, as Big Sam Allardyce found, right, if you're good enough, they'll find a way, right? So the idea is to be able to tell that player what it's going to take for him to go play. Or even it's a guy coming from West Africa. We've got connections in Togo and Nigeria. We bring a player over. He goes to college here as a student. He does his student and gets his degree. When he comes out, he's got his year's work permit. So he's got a temporary A number, which allows him to go on trial and get seen. Now, if he's got a girlfriend in college or he gets engaged, then you're looking at a naturalized citizen who can then go and play as if he's an American.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
So that's ways, yeah. And that's kind of what happened in my side of the house, right? I mean, when I came over here, I came back after I played with Partick Thistle and got married, and then ended up with the Kickers. Yeah. Although I never played, I mean, I was a pay-for-play contract. I was training every day, and it was one of those that got it started.
I see. I wanted to ask though, because I mean, I know part of this is that you all are trying to kind of not have as much money be involved. It's not so much like, we're taking 10,000 people in our academies and you have to pay $5,000 each, But I'm wondering, I mean, I'm assuming that there is some sort of remuneration that you all are making some money out of this.
So there definitely is.
Yeah. So what's the process there? Is it like, because it does, I know it's not, but it does sound like it could be misconstrued as like third party ownership almost, that you all are developing players, doing all the signing for them, and then kind of like having ownership rights of them, and I'm guessing that's not the case. So I just wanted to see what the kind of process is there.
Yeah, no. I don't want to be hypocritical here, because we've just basically laid into the fee-for-service model. But the actual fee itself, we do charge a fee which basically goes towards expenses. We cover the accommodation for the player, and we cover their breakfasts, and then we also take care of their training equipment. So that, if you take a look at it, we charge $1,800. It's about $1,000 for the player to stay for the 10 days, including his food and accommodation. So basically, the other money is going to pay for the coaches to come over. Yeah. It's basically expenses for the coaches to fly over from Europe to go through the paces. And again, we're limited to 30. What we did is we have a break-even model without getting deep into the technical side of the house. So it's a break-even model with a 10% profitability, which then goes towards players that if they come in and they go through the paces and they want to get signed, and they don't have the ability to go to the next level, as the scouts come in, right, and we see them and they say, okay, this guy's good enough, but he can't afford to go to Europe, we'll cover that fee for the player to fly over to Europe and go through his trial.
Gotcha.
So, it's giving back again. We're trying to give enough money of a cushion that if a player needs to go, we'll cover his flight over, and again, help him out with what he needs to do accommodation-wise.
And before I let you go, I did want to ask you one other sort of related thing. You mentioned Partisan a few times. I'm guessing most of our listeners who are not based in Richmond maybe don't know Partisan Richmond, but that's the local amateur club that you started that now is playing at multiple different levels in the CVSA, which is the local amateur league here. I'm wondering, because we get questions from people all the time about how to start a club or how to organize a team. Partisan, it seems, have been very successful in that regard. So I'm wondering, what motivated you to start Partisan, and then what advice would you give people who are starting an amateur club or starting to play in an amateur league?
Well, so I think the motivation for starting Partisan is, as you find in the amateur, there's all different levels. There's guys that just want to play for recreation, and then there's the guys that are dropping out of the professional ranks, right? And then there's that gap, which is really why I started Partisan. After U18, in the American club system for the youth, there is nobody picking you up after that. So unless you go to college, you just drop off. There's nothing, right? So with starting Partisan, what we did is we created that bridge for a player who might not go to college to be able to step in and actually play, right, and continue his soccer growth, right, knowing that he's going to go, if he maybe takes a year or 2 years, maybe he's going to junior college, and then he's good enough, he can go and play in college. Or if he's good enough, he can go and play with the local Richmond Kickers or whatever. So we're creating that bridge. So for the guys that are coming out, who are done with the professional side of the house, they can still play at a high level, but they're also helping those young players who are still coming through. But we're also creating that community thing as well, where guys that need jobs, are helping each other with jobs and the whole 9 yards. So that was the reason why we started it. In terms of making it more bona fide, we took a different approach. We made Partisan a company, which that immediately gave us a little bit more continuity. It gave us a little bit more credence, and it allowed us to do a little bit more fundraising, right? Same as the European model is. When you start a club over there, there's always fundraisers and sponsorship and that kind of thing that goes on. It's kind of hard to do that when you're just one guy with 11 other friends starting a soccer team. Give us some money. So what we did is we put a company together, which basically allowed the guys to have something to write sponsorship off on, but it was something that could grow, so we became a full-service club. So, but in terms of next steps for somebody who wants to start a club, the biggest expense is always getting a uniform. Right? Yep. If you can get yourself your uniform, then you're a bunch of guys, that's your team. What I would say to you is just understand that it's not as easy as you think. Trying to keep things going is always the hard part, because, it's people want to do things for a while and then they get bored and they go do something else. So I think the key thing is being full service, making it different. I'll give you an example. We're going to go play against the Williamsburg 76 NPSL team next Saturday, May 6th, down at the Warner Stadium. So Partisan's going to go down and play against them. They actually have the week after, where Kevin Darcy's taking that team down to go play in North Carolina in the US Open Cup, which is the equivalent of the FA Cup over here. So we've been able to do things that are a little bit different, which keeps it exciting for our players, and it also allows it to be something that people can continue to push up the levels, as well as just joining up and playing on a Sunday and getting a good sweat.
Yeah, that all makes sense. And you all, I think, do a good job of when you talk about the motivation and keeping people with it. I don't think I've ever played against a Partisan team that didn't have 8 subs, and I have definitely played on teams where we started with 25 on the roster and we finished the season with 9 starters. So that's always nice for you all, and terrible when you play against Partisan.
Well, it's a thing, it's what we said, right? Nobody wants to show up and play with 9 men on a Sunday, mate. There's nothing worse than that.
No, there's not.
You're the 9th man.
Oh yeah, we actually did do that recently. I completely forgot about that. Yeah, that wasn't fun. We really did finish with 9, and you all had, I think, 700 people. I could be wrong. Oh, that was fun. Well, John, thank you so much. But if people want to find out more about the program, about Prep4Pro, where can they go? How can they learn more about it?
It's www.prep4pro.com, or if you go to the Partisan Richmond Facebook page, or if you go to Prep4Pro, Facebook page on Prep4Pro, you'll be able to find that information there.
And that's Prep and then the number 4 Pro. There we go. All right, well, John, thanks a lot. I know you got places to go, people to see, so thanks for taking the time, and I'll see you out there, I think.
Sounds good. I'll see you Sunday. Thanks, Taylor.
Yeah, John. See ya.